Hey y'all, I typically do not really share what I'm dealing with in real time or even afterwards. But as I have been walking through what I'm about to share with you, I sense that this will be eye opening for someone else as well. So I am actually wearing a boot right now from an injury, and it made me think about the spiritual parallels in all of this. And what really happened kind of started off with what seemed like a small mistake. I did not take off my shoes to participate in something which caused me to fall and sprain my ankle. And during the initial fall, I did not really realize how serious the injury was because I have a high pain tolerance. And that alone was a revelation in itself because sometimes we assume being able to endure pain means that something is not as severe as it is. And sometimes having a high pain tolerance becomes dangerous because it teaches us to normalize damage because I thought I was okay. I continued the activity I was engaged in. But after about 30 seconds of really neglecting the trauma that had happened, my ankle began to hurt. It started swelling and it became bruised and eventually became unbearable to walk on. And that spoke volumes to me because unaddressed pain does not disappear just because you keep moving. Suppression could look like strength, but often it is delayed suffering. And what is even more revealing is that I did not fully acknowledge how I was feeling because I wanted to really just keep my commitment to spending time with a dear friend of mine. And yes, she saw what happened to me and thought it was not that bad. Others later also did not fully really understand or comprehend what happened. They could only assess what was visible. What they could not feel was the pain that was taking place internally. And what I come to really just ponder on is that pain typically is often an internal experience that other people cannot accurately measure. And people often judge the severity of what happened to us based on how we present ourselves. So if we are still smiling, still functioning, still showing up, people assume we are okay. Meanwhile, swelling is happening beneath the surface and the damage was progressing for me internally while the activity I was engaged in was continually externally. And to add more weight to it, I kept walking, limping, and even driving. I suppressed how I was truly feeling out of habit. And I think that may be one of like the deepest revelations in all of this story because suppression, it was more so like a habitual suppression and it exposed a pattern in me, probably a learned behavior by minimizing my own pain, maybe from not wanting to inconvenience others or pushing through commitments, no matter the personal cost, right? Or even just maybe choosing composure over just being honest or even maybe just emotionally tucking it up because that has just become a norm. And so sometimes that becomes self-neglect, especially for people who are used to being dependable, strong, available, in high capacity for others. Sometimes we become so accustomed to carrying pain and pressure and disappointment, exhaustion, grief, loneliness, or even trauma that we no longer, accurately assess when something is actually wrong. We keep going because we can, right? But being able to keep going is not proof that continuing is rooted in wisdom. Eventually, I could not take the pain any longer and needed to leave where we were. And honestly, I actually just wanted to get away to go and cry alone because of just how much the pain was increasing, even though I still sucked it up, right? And sometimes we have learned to suffer in private rather than honestly expressing what we need. And because we minimize our pain, it can make it difficult for others to respond appropriately. My friend feels horrible for not taking my injury seriously. She feels horrible for even wanting to kind of continue what we planned instead of, really encouraging me with a force to go get checked out right away. And I will say that, she was not wrong. I actually really did see this from a place of compassion, because sometimes we are that friend, right? Sometimes we underestimate someone else's pain because from the outside, it appears manageable, right? We think it is small, not realizing that even a small tear or fracture can create significant pain. Sometimes people need us to ask a second question, dig deeper. Sometimes they need us to notice the limp beneath the smile. But there's also another side to this as well. People can only respond to what we communicate. Sometimes people fail us, yes, but sometimes we have become so practiced at concealment that others do not really realize how much help we actually need. And the other part of this story is that the boot was delayed in its arriving to me. So while waiting for the thing that would assist healing, I had to compensate, right? I had to adapt. I had to improvise. I was literally hopping around on one leg just to move around in my house, upstairs, downstairs, all around, hopping on one leg. And that revealed what we often do when healing support feels delayed. So what do we do when answers feel delayed, relief feels delayed, or structure needed for recovery has not yet arrived? Many times we compensate. We figure out how to survive in the meantime. But survival adaptations often create new pain. After a while, the leg that was helping me move around started to hurt too. And the healthy leg became strained, carrying what it was never meant to carry by itself. And so that alone was another form of revelation for me, because how many of us have a strong side that has become kind of overburdened because another area of our life is injured? The dependable side, the resilient side, the responsible side, the productive side, the spiritually mature side, the caregiving side. Eventually, even that side, starts to hurt because it was compensating, and compensation on one leg is not really healing. Adapting is not restoration. Survival is not recovery. Sometimes we applaud ourselves for making it work while slowly injuring the very part of us keeping everything afloat. And then there was the issue of rest, right? My sleep became hindered because the pain kept waking me up in the middle of the night. Sleep is supposed to be a place of restoration, but the pain interrupted my process of restoration. So if I turned the wrong way, the pain jolted me out of my resting place, and I would have to reposition myself and my ankle until I found the angle where the pain would actually lessen. And sometimes we think healing has happened simply because the pain becomes less or non-existent in a short period of time while we are in certain positions. Sometimes we structure our lives around pain avoidance instead of actually healing. We say, don't touch that topic. Don't mention that person. Don't revisit that season all over again. Don't challenge that wound. As long as life stays positioned a certain way, the pain feels manageable. But if we make one wrong move, it reveals what remains unresolved in us. And then this thought hit me that even when we are unconscious, pain can still occur. Just because I was asleep does not mean the injury was no longer active. Just because I was not, consciously focused on the pain did not mean it was healed. That is profound, even spiritually and emotionally, right? Suppression in waking life in our day-to-day does not mean healing happened underneath. Some pain continues beneath when we cannot really see. Unprocessed trauma can still influence reactions. Hidden grief can still affect the nervous system. Unacknowledged wounds can still shape our relationships. Spiritual injuries can still impact, trust and obedience and intimacy with God. You do not have to be consciously thinking about pain for pain to still be active. Now, I am wearing the boot. I'll say that. And this boot is extremely uncomfortable, and I don't really know how to walk in it naturally. I truly feel unstable in it, and my movement is restricted. And yet the restriction is part of the healing. And sometimes restriction is mercy. Since you would not voluntarily sit down, movement must now be restricted because unrestricted movement would have worsened the injury further. And so healing often feels like boundaries. Boundaries feels restrictive when you are used to overextending. Rest feels unnatural when productivity has become your identity, right? Stillness feels unstable when movement has been your coping mechanism. And then sometimes God will allow things to happen that force us to sit down, to rest, to heal, or simply just pay attention because he understands what continued movement would cost us, right? Sometimes discomfort, instability, limitation, and restriction become the very environments where healing and restoration can finally take place. And what we ignore in the name of strength often grows until healing requires restriction. Pain that is unacknowledged will eventually demand attention, and God may use discomfort, limitation, and instability to heal what we refuse to properly tend to. And so for me, this is no longer just about an ankle injury anymore. The ankle became the parable, and I had to just ask myself, where else have I been walking on a sprain? Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally, in my calling? What part of me has become overburdened because another part of me was never properly healed? Where have I said, I'm fine, it's not that bad, I could push through, or, I don't want to really inconvenience anyone else, while internally I'm swelling. The pain is still happening because maybe, this was never just about the injury. Maybe it was more about what the injury was trying to reveal in me. So I leave this question with you, right? What are you still walking on that should have been tended to? What internal injury have you normalized because you have learned how to function through pain? What has been swelling beneath the surface while everyone else around you assumes you are fine because you keep showing up, you keep smiling, you keep producing, you keep serving, you keep surviving? What part of you has become overburdened because another part of you was never properly healed? Maybe your emotions have been limping, right? Maybe your spirit has been strained. Maybe your mind has been compensating for other areas. Maybe your relationships are being affected by wounds you thought time would heal alone. And so do not confuse movement with healing. Do not confuse survival with restoration, and do not assume silence means that the pain is gone. Some things require acknowledgement before they can really be healed. So before life forces a greater restriction upon you, ask yourself, where am I still walking on a sprained ankle? I love you, and I want you to know that this is all about faith, leadership, and growth. And I would love to continue to walk with you as you continue to grow. So until next time, keep trusting God and keep growing in Him.